Hello, I'm Alan Critchley, an independent social worker writing safeguarding adult reviews for Kent. I'm going to talk to you today about Paul. Paul was a white British male who was aged 59 when he died by suicide following a jump from a bridge. He'd been diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, manic-type bipolar, and some physical health issues as well. He was known to have care and support needs, and he'd received a support package. He'd had a long history of amphetamine and alcohol misuse. Paul had been known to agencies in Kent and Medway primarily for his mental ill health since 2014. In 2021, he was placed in a mental health unit away from Kent, and from September 2022, he was considered to be ready for discharge and planning commenced. He was actually discharged in September 2022, back to the flat where he'd had a tenancy prior to his hospital admission. Records show that Paul had a history of non-compliance with medication that often led to relapse in his mental ill health. Information supplied by Adult Social Care tells of Paul growing up with his parents, 2 brothers and a sister. There were multiple bereavements in the family, his father dying when Paul was in his teens. Paul lost his wife to pancreatic cancer and his mother to liver cancer shortly afterwards. His twin brother also died, and a son died from a heroin overdose in 2015. Paul's sister was asked to contribute to the review, but he hasn't responded. So the family input that we would like to have had for this review, unfortunately, we haven't been able to obtain. Now, a little bit about the timeline leading to Paul's death. Throughout the narrative, it was clear that Paul felt safer whilst he was in hospital. The dilemma was that he became well enough for discharge, but he really didn't want to return to the community without the level of support that he'd received whilst in hospital. What compounded Paul's problems was that once he was discharged and he was no longer subject to section, he declined the intramuscular injections that he'd accepted in hospital. This led to a period between his discharge in December 2022 and a medicine review in February 2023, where he was insufficiently medicated. His mental health declined over the period and didn't recover to the level it was at when he was discharged from hospital. The decline was particularly marked from early January 23, when he didn't allow carers into his flat, and he declined to see a social worker who'd been asked to undertake a care needs assessment. From the 1st of April 23, Paul asked to be admitted to hospital, saying that he felt mentally unwell. He described his mind as awake and racing. After an attempt to treat him in the community, it was agreed that Paul would be admitted to hospital on the 3rd of April 2023. He was said to be paranoid and he expressed suicidal ideation. By mid-April 23, Paul was asking to be discharged, but he was thought to be too unwell, and the use of a section to detain him was considered. He had been prescribed drugs, and the expectation was that this would help him, and that once it had begun to take effect, he could then be discharged. Paul was given periods of leave from hospital, and during one of the periods of leave, he was seen to be on a bridge on 3 separate days. He was reported to the police, and on each occasion, he was returned to the hospital. Paul was finally discharged from hospital on the 19th of April 2023, even though that was one of the days that he'd been returned to the hospital earlier, having been seen on a bridge. The hospital had determined that they'd stabilised Paul sufficiently for him to be treated in the community. The intention was that a social worker should undertake a care needs assessment and that he would be supported by the community mental health team. A social worker did attempt to contact Paul, but Paul didn't want to engage with them. Likewise, the community mental health team were also unable to engage with Paul. In early May, Paul contacted the community mental health team asking to be readmitted to hospital. He said that he was struggling and that his mind was racing. When Paul was told that he wouldn't be readmitted, he was said to have become abusive and the call was terminated. Paul died by suicide very shortly afterwards. Now, the recommendations from this review Recommendation 1, that information with regards to mental health should be shared between all the agencies working with an individual when they're discharged from hospital or just prior to their discharge. Agencies should reinforce this with all relevant staff and contractors and confirm that the discharge information should include all the information about medication, risk, prescriptions and relapse indicators. This recommendation is for relevant agencies, health and social care, to include the person involved, Paul in this case, to ensure that agency confidentiality is not a block to providing health. And this recommendation is made to all secondary healthcare providers across Kent and Medway and to adult social care teams who support those who are discharged. Next recommendation, recommendation 2, agencies to remind staff through the findings of this Safeguarding Adult Review that professional curiosity is an important part of any assessment. And this recommendation is relevant to all secondary healthcare providers. Recommendation 3 is that all relevant professional groups should be involved in the support and care planning for an individual. This applies to all agencies who might call and host multi-agency meetings. And this recommendation is for all agencies of the Kent and Medway Safeguarding Adult Board. My thanks to you for listening. Thank you.